Okay, have you guys seen this? This TikTok, I mean, this thing went viral, like crazy viral. It's this mom, and her electricity got shut off.
Oh, yeah. I think I saw something about that.
Yeah, and so it turned into this whole thing because she was saying, like, the father of her kids should be helping out financially.
Right.
And then everybody online is like, well, wait, whose responsibility is it when a family splits? Like, who pays for what?
Yeah, it gets complicated.
So that's what we're going to try to unpack today, like all the
Yeah.
ins and outs of shared expenses when you're co-parenting.
Absolutely. It's like you said, it's a really complex issue, and this TikTok really just brought all that to the surface.
Totally, totally. And it's something that I think a lot of people are dealing with, in their own lives.
Yeah.
So we're going to be diving into, we looked at a bunch of different sources for this, but the Chat BOX podcast actually did a really great episode on this that we're going to be referencing.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there are some really strong arguments on both sides of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like why some people think you should absolutely be sharing utility costs.
Mm-hmm.
And then others were like, hold on, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
So let's start with, why don't we start with the side that says, okay, co-parents should share utility costs.
Yeah.
Like, what are the arguments there?
Well, one of the things that the Chat BRX podcast really emphasized is that utilities, they're not just like these extra things. They're absolutely essential for kids to have a safe and stable home.
Right.
You're talking about electricity, you're talking about water, heat, even internet access these days, which, let's face it, is pretty much a necessity for school.
Especially these days, yeah. I mean, can you imagine trying to, do homework or, live in a house where there's no heat or, the lights are constantly going off? It's not fair to the kids.
Yeah.
And I think, that's part of the argument, right, is that it's about, both parents kind of contributing to making sure that the kids have a stable environment.
And not only that, but in a lot of these co-parenting situations, it's usually one parent, more often than not, that's carrying the bulk of the household expenses.
Right.
So sharing those costs, particularly the utilities, it just helps to create a little bit more balance.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the finances, it's really about showing a commitment to the kids' well-being from both sides.
And I think it kind of sends a message to the kids too, right?
Mm.
Like that even though mom and dad aren't together, they're still a team when it comes to taking care of them.
Exactly. Yeah, like that united front, even though the romantic relationship has ended.
Exactly, yeah.
The Chat BOX podcast even mentioned some research showing that kids in situations where the parents are, kind of cooperating on the finances tend to do better. They have higher self-esteem, better relationships with both parents, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've got all these reasons why it's good to share those utility costs, that shared responsibility piece.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing there's another side to this coin, right?
Absolutely. There are a lot of people who say, wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
Splitting utility bills, it's not always the right approach.
Right.
So let's dive into that perspective. Imagine you're the non-custodial parent. You're watching this TikTok and you see this mom and she's remarried. And you might be thinking, hold on, why am I financially responsible for her household, especially when I'm already taking care of my own bills? I've got my own place.
Yeah, it's like, I've moved on. I've got my own responsibilities.
Right.
It's not my problem anymore. So it's about, personal accountability, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of, I'm responsible for myself. I shouldn't have to pay for somebody else's choices, especially if things have changed.
Especially if, their situation's different now. They've remarried or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And sometimes, it even goes deeper than just the money part.
Yeah.
Like, think about all the emotional baggage that can come with a breakup. You've got all that history, maybe some resentment,
Right.
maybe some, disagreements about finances in the past.
Oh, yeah.
So suddenly, shared finances become this, minefield.
Yeah, it can get really messy really fast.
I can.
And then, instead of promoting this healthy co-parenting relationship, it just makes things worse.
And who ends up suffering in those situations?
The kids, of course.
The kids.
It's like you're trying to do the right thing.
Right.
You want to provide for the kids, but if there are all these underlying emotional issues or trust issues or whatever, it's almost impossible to make it work.
Right. The Chat BOX podcast had this family therapist on, and she actually said that sometimes shared finances can become like a weapon, like a way for one parent to control or manipulate the other one.
Yeah, that's scary.
And again, it's the kids who get caught in the crossfire.
Oh, so sad. And It's funny because like in this TikTok video, it's just like this little snippet, right?
Right.
We don't actually know the whole story.
Right.
We don't know, like, if he's already paying child support, we don't know what their arrangement was
I don't know
before.
if there was an agreement.
Like, we just don't have the full context.
Right.
So it's kind of a reminder that, like, these situations are rarely black and white.
Yeah,
There's always more to the story.
exactly. So we've got these two sides,
Uh-huh.
You've got the people who are saying, share the utilities. It's about commitment to the kids. It's about their well-being.
Yeah.
And then you've got the other side that's saying, hold on, financial independence is important. We don't want to open this door to conflict.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that this wasn't just a, private family drama playing out on TikTok. It became this massive public conversation
Yeah.
about how we think about co-parenting and responsibility, especially in these modern families. So it gets really interesting.
It does. So break it down for me. Like, what were the main, like, viewpoints that emerged online, like, from all this debate?
The Chat BMX podcast did a great job of highlighting 3 major perspectives that came up.
Okay. Good.
And they're all really interesting.
All right. Well, let's hear them.
Are you ready to dive in?
I am.
Okay.
Tell me what people were saying.
All right. So remember we were talking about those 3 perspectives?
Oh, yeah. The online debate and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So the first one, and this was like the loudest voice in the room, was the shared responsibility is absolutely essential camp.
Okay.
Like, they were not messing around. They were saying both parents have got to contribute to the kids' well-being no matter what.
Like, regardless of who lives where or what their relationship is like now.
Yeah, like, even if they're not living in the same house, they still got to step up financially.
Right. So it's more about, like, recognizing that both parents have an equal role, not necessarily about, like, traditional gender roles or who makes more money or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, like, both parents' contributions are valuable, even if it's not equal in every single way.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
And the Chapiak podcast talked about this study where they found that when both parents are involved in financial decisions, the kids actually do better overall.
Really?
Yeah, they're more resilient, they adapt better to change, all that.
Wow. So it's almost like he gives them this sense of security, right? Like, mom and dad may not be together, but there's still a team?
Exactly. It's that united front, even if the relationship itself has changed.
Okay, so that's the first perspective. What about the second one?
Okay, so the second one was a little more, I guess you could say nuanced. They weren't necessarily against financial support, but they were like, hold on, maybe just splitting the bills down the middle isn't always fair.
Right, because every situation is different, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, what if one parent is barely making ends meet and the other one is, doing really well?
Yeah, or what if there's already child support being paid? Like, how do you factor all that in?
Right. Exactly. And this group, they were really big on open communication and flexibility.
Yep.
They were saying, like, hey, let's look at each family situation individually and come up with a plan that works for them.
So it's more like tailoring a solution, right?
Yeah, like a custom fit instead of one size fits all.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So that was perspective number 2. Now, the third one, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
This group was basically saying once a parent remarries, the financial responsibility shifts to the new couple.
Whoa, okay, hold on. So they're saying the non-custodial parent is basically off the hook.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty different take.
It is. And it really challenges how we traditionally think about family and responsibility, especially with all these blended families these days.
Yeah, I mean, things are so different now than they used to be.
Right. It's not just mom and dad splitting the check anymore.
Yeah, there are so many other factors to consider. Okay, so we've got these 3 perspectives: shared responsibility, individualized solutions, and then this, like, new family unit idea.
Exactly. And it's like trying to find a balance between all of them,
Yeah, because they all kind of have valid points.
They do. And it's about respecting everyone's needs while still making sure the kids are taken care of.
That's a tough one. So, like, practically speaking, if you're a co-parent trying to figure this out, where do you even begin?
Well, that's the good news. The Chat BX podcast actually had some really good advice on that.
Okay, tell me more.
They talked about some different approaches to shared expenses that, take all these different perspectives into account.
Okay, so it's not just like throwing your hands up in the air and saying good luck.
Exactly. There are some actual tools and strategies you can use.
All right, I'm ready. Let's hear what they are. Okay, so we've really been digging into this whole shared expenses thing.
Yeah, it's complicated.
It is. And, at the end of the day, it's the kids who are caught in the middle of all this.
Absolutely. And their well-being has got to be the priority.
Right, exactly. So, how do all these, financial tug-of-wars, the arguments about bills and responsibility, how does that actually affect the kids?
Well, imagine you're a kid and your parents are constantly fighting about money.
Yeah.
It's got to be so unsettling, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Especially for younger kids, they often blame themselves for the separation. They think, if I was better, maybe they wouldn't fight so much.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is. And then when they see their parents arguing about money, it just makes those feelings of insecurity even worse.
It's like they don't have a stable foundation anymore.
Right. And the Chappie X podcast had this child psychologist on, and she was saying that when kids are exposed to that kind of conflict, especially about money, they're more likely to have problems.
Like what kind of problems?
Like emotional problems, behavioral problems. They might struggle in school, have trouble sleeping.
Wow.
Some even show signs of anxiety or depression.
That's really serious. So it's not just about, who pays the bills. It's about the emotional impact on the kids.
Exactly. It's like this ripple effect. The financial stress creates tension, and that tension affects the kids, and their whole sense of security is shaken up.
So what can co-parents do about that? How can they protect their kids from all this?
Well, the first thing is to try to keep the conflict away from the kids as much as possible.
Okay.
Don't have those big arguments about money when they're around.
So no more shouting matches over the bills at the dinner table.
Right, exactly.
Okay, got it.
Find a time and a place to talk about it when the kids aren't listening. And even if you're feeling frustrated, try to stay calm, especially in front of them.
It's like you have to put on a brave face for them.
Yeah. And it's also really important to keep reassuring them that they're loved, that both parents are there for them no matter what.
So those little reminders, mommy and daddy love you very much, that actually helps.
It does. It helps them feel safe.
Okay, good.
And even if there are changes, maybe they have to move to a smaller house or something, try to spin it in a positive way.
So instead of saying we can't afford this anymore, it's more like, hey, we're going to try something new.
Exactly. Focus on the good stuff.
Okay, I like that.
And, you can even involve the kids in some of the conversations, depending on their age, of course.
Oh, yeah, on their level.
Yeah, just explain things in a way they can understand. Let them know that things are changing and everyone needs to work together.
It's like teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Right. Teamwork makes the family work, even if it looks different now.
I love that.
And, sometimes co-parenting is just really hard.
Yeah, especially if there's, a lot of baggage from the past.
It can be tough. So remember, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, right.
A therapist, a counselor, they can be so helpful.
Like a coach.
Yeah, exactly. Someone to guide you and give you support. Because co-parenting, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's definitely a long game.
It is, but it's worth it.
So I think we've covered a lot today. We talked about the pros and cons of sharing expenses. We looked at the different perspectives people have. And we talked about how all of this impacts the kids.
And hopefully we've given our listeners some tools they can use to figure things out in their own lives.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want people to remember from all of this?
I think the most important thing is to put the kids first. Finances can be tough, especially after a breakup, but at the end of the day, it's about creating a loving and stable environment for the kids.
That's a great point.
And remember, communication is key. Talk to each other, find solutions that work for everyone, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
That's great advice. And hey, listeners, if you're going through this, just know you're not alone. There are people who can help.
Absolutely.
So that's it for our deep dive today. We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic.
See you then.
Until then, keep those conversations going and keep diving deep.